investors with more rights, literally, to land and to water than even local or national governments have. And so the basis of Pacific Rim's lawsuit is that they didn't get these permits, even though the Salvadoran government has every right to give or not give mining permits based on what the impact will be. And in this case, you know, because Pacific Rim is going to use or proposing to use cyanide extraction, presents a tremendous health and environmental danger to the community. So the really central issue here is about sovereignty. Does El Salvador, do the other countries in Central America have the right to enforce their own environmental laws, or do transnational corporations get to rule?
Alexis Stambelis, even before these latest murders, a large number of human rights groups, including your organization, the Committee on the People of El Salvador, the American Jewish World Service, American Solidarity Organization, and many others, wrote a letter to Secretary of State Clinton. What are you demanding?
Well, the United States is El Salvador is extremely dependent in many ways still on the United States. El Salvador, having been governed for the last 20 years by the right-wing Arena Party, has been one of the United States' closest allies in Latin America over the past 20 years. And what is really necessary right now is for these murders to be investigated, not just on a superficial level of trying to find, you know, the gunmen, but really going beyond that to investigate the intellectual authors behind these murders. They are very systematic. They are very targeted. And what we've seen, you know, as you mentioned with Ramiro Rivera, he was under 24-hour police protection. So the people who are responsible for this, who are calling the shots or who are making this happen, must have a pretty extensive amount of financial resources or institutional resources. And so it's going beyond just chalking this up to common crime or gang-related violence. And CISPAS, along with a lot of other organizations in the U.S. and Canada, has been putting pressure both on the Salvadoran government directly, on the Attorney General of El Salvador, to really investigate these as politically motivated assassinations and to stop the impunity that is allowing these assassinations to continue. But it's also really critical to put that pressure on the United States, which is so deeply involved, over-involved in El Salvador's internal governance. And
you're calling on a new U.S. ambassador to be sent to El Salvador?
Well, there are. President Obama recently did announce a new U.S. ambassador to El Salvador, which will be a welcome change, we hope. But what we really need to see is both U.S. We need to see support for support from the United States to respecting and supporting El Salvador's internal and independent processes by which they are really going to investigate police corruption, where they're really going to potentially, and we hope, expose whatever networks are behind these kinds of targeted and systematic assassinations. And, you know, it's not for the United States to intervene in those investigations, but rather to respect El Salvador's independent process of doing so and provide the support that El Salvador may be calling for.
And the significance of the new president, you talked about Arena ruling for years, Mauricio Funes, and what is he demanding right now, especially when this latest murder of Dora, with the wounding of her 2-year-old son? She was 8 months pregnant on the way back from the laundry.
Yeah, it's, you know, this is a really incredibly important moment in El Salvador. After 20 years of a very hard right government, the Salvadoran people have elected their first progressive government, the FMLN. Is now in charge of the presidency and in the majority, well, not the majority, but having the most seats in the Legislative Assembly. And so there is really a role like we've never had before to hear the voices of people be reflected at the top levels of the government. And Mauricio Funes spoke out last week specifically around the assassination of Ramiro Rivera and vowed to investigate fully and not to allow this case to continue in impunity, which was was very exciting. But it is going to take a lot more than that. And as it has in El Salvador for many years, the movement has come from the social movement. It's come from the grassroots. It's come from the affected communities. And groups like the National Coalition Against Mining have been and are continuing to push the Salvadoran government, Mauricio Funes himself, to take even a stronger stand and to really make this a priority. Because as they have been saying, as long as these cases remain in impunity, the assassinations will continue. The FMLN, as a political party, has made a very strong denouncement yesterday against the violence and a commitment to investigating. And they have also made a public commitment against mining and have actually introduced a bill in the Legislative Assembly, which is going to take a huge push to actually ban all forms of metallic mining, which would be the first in the world.
Alexis Dimbelis, I want to thank you very much for being with us, Executive Director of CISPACE, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, speaking to us from Boston. We will certainly continue to follow this case. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, we'll be going